Ralph Waldo Emerson. Ralph Waldo Emerson, May 25, 1803 to April 27, 1882, who went by his middle name Waldo, was an American essayist, lecturer, philosopher, abolitionist, and poet who led the transcendentalist movement of the mid-19th century. A champion of individualism and critical thinking, as well as a prescient critic of the countervailing pressures of society and conformity. Friedrich Nietzsche thought he was the most gifted of the Americans, and Walt Whitman called him his master. Emerson was born in Boston, Massachusetts, on May 25, 1803, to Ruth Haskins and the Rev. William Emerson, a Unitarian minister. He was named after his mother's brother Ralph and his father's great-grandmother Rebecca Waldo. Ralph Waldo was the second of 5 sons who survived into adulthood. The others were William, Edward, Robert Bulkeley, and Charles. Emerson gradually moved away from the religious and social beliefs of his contemporaries, formulating and expressing the philosophy of transcendentalism in his 1836 essay, Nature. Following this work, he gave a speech entitled The American Scholar in 1837, which Oliver Wendell Holmes Sr. considered to be America's intellectual declaration of independence. Emerson's first journey to Europe. He met with the writer Walter Savage Landor and explored Florence, Rome, Venice, and Milan. In Paris, he visited the Jardin des Plantes. The massive botanical garden had a powerful effect on Emerson. He wrote, "I feel the centipede in me, cayman, carp, eagle, and fox. I am moved by strange sympathies. I say continually, I will be a naturalist." Emerson toured Europe in 1833 and later wrote of his travels in English Traits, 1856. He left aboard the brig Jasper on Christmas Day, 1832, sailing first to Malta. During his European trip, he spent several months in Italy, visiting Rome, Florence, and Venice, among other cities. When in Rome, he met with John Stuart Mill, who gave him a letter of recommendation to meet Thomas Carlyle. He went to Switzerland and had to be dragged by fellow passengers to visit Voltaire's home in Ferney, protesting all the way upon the unworthiness of his memory. He then went on to Paris, a loud modern New York of a place, where he visited the Jardin des Plantes. He was greatly moved by the organization of plants according to Juss's system of classification, and the way all such objects were related and connected. As Robert D. Richardson says, Emerson's moment of insight into the interconnectedness of things in the Jardin des Plantes was a moment of almost visionary intensity that pointed him away from theology and toward science. Nature's influence on Emerson. Nature was a very large part of Emerson's philosophy, his approach to life and his motivation. When he purchased his home on Cambridge Turnpike in Concord in 1835, he immediately started planting trees. In his poem Hamatria is the thought that the earth laughs in flowers. Emerson kept voluminous journals. At the age of 16, in his junior year at Harvard, he made his first journal entry. He named his journal The Wide World. The entry was dated January 25, 1820, and he wrote continuously for the next 60 years. Emerson's journals became the starting point for most of his writing. The purpose of life is not to be happy. It is to be useful, to be honorable, to be compassionate, to have it make some difference that you have lived and lived well. Walk the route that Emerson and his friend Henry David Thoreau traveled from Emerson's home to Thoreau's cabin on Walden Pond. While on these walks, they held many conversations and commented on the nature around them. Ralph Waldo Emerson, a man of radical ideas and personal grace, devoted his long life to a search for the highest spiritual, ethical, and natural truths, and struggled to apply his ideas and insights to the cultural, social, and political issues of his fast-growing young country. Make yourself necessary to somebody. Do not make life hard to any. Conduct of Life Lectures, 1860. Emersons lived in Concord. There were many visitors who came to see Ralph Waldo Emerson. Nathaniel Hawthorne, writer; John Muir, naturalist; Bronson Alcott, educator; Margaret Fuller, journalist and writer; Louisa May Alcott, author; John Brown, abolitionist; James Elliott Cabot, lawyer; William Ellery Channing, poet and writer; Henry David Thoreau, writer; Walt Whitman, poet and essayist. As a lecturer and orator, Emerson, nicknamed the Sage of Concord, became the leading voice of intellectual culture in the United States. James Russell Lowell, editor of the Atlantic Monthly and the North American Review, commented in his book My Study, Windows, 1871, that Emerson was not only the most steadily attractive lecturer in America, but also one of the pioneers of the lecturing system. Emerson's home in Concord, Massachusetts. After studying at Harvard, Ralph Waldo Emerson entered the ministry, but found himself unable to administer the sacraments in good consciousness after the death of his 19-year-old wife, Ellen. He left the church. My life is not an apology, but a life. It is for itself and not for a spectacle. I much prefer that it should be of a lower strain, so it be genuine and equal, than that it should be glittering and unsteady. Ralph Waldo Emerson. In 1837, Emerson befriended Henry David Thoreau. Though they had likely met as early as 1835, in the fall of 1837, Emerson asked Thoreau, "Do you keep a journal?" The question went on to be a lifelong inspiration for Thoreau. Emerson's own journal was published in 16 large volumes, in the definitive Harvard University Press edition issued between 1960 and 1982. Some scholars consider the journal to be Emerson's key literary work. The remarkable friendship of Emerson and Thoreau. Those of us who have been blessed with mentors may know that marvelous feeling when the relationship evolves into friendship, and this seems to have been the case with Emerson and Thoreau. Emerson's books. Nature, 1836, Society and Solitude, 1870, Concord Hymn, 1847, The American Scholar, 1837, The Oversoul, 1841, The Complete Works of Ralph Waldo Emerson, 1860. Race and Slavery. Emerson maintained that reform would be achieved through moral agreement rather than by militant action. By August 1, 1844, at a lecture in Concord, he stated more clearly his support for the abolitionist movement. We are indebted mainly to this movement, and to the continuers of it, for the popular discussion of every point of practical ethics. Emerson is often known as one of the most liberal democratic thinkers of his time, who believed that through the democratic process, slavery should be abolished. While being an avid abolitionist who was known for his criticism of the legality of slavery, Emerson struggled with the implications of race. Emerson had his first encounter with slavery. At one point, he attended a meeting of the Bible Society while a slave auction was taking place in the yard outside. He wrote, "One ear therefore heard the glad tidings of great joy, whilst the other was regaled with going gentlemen going." Literary influences. William Wordsworth, an English poet; Thomas Carlyle, a Scottish writer; Johann Wolfgang von Goethe, German writer; Samuel Coleridge, the English poet; Victor Cousin, a French philosopher; Emanuel Swedenborg, and scientist. Some books leave us free, and some books make us free. Emerson bust, sculpted by Daniel Chester French, was a neighbor and friend of Emerson and the Alcott family. On April 21, 1882, Emerson was found to be suffering from pneumonia. He died 6 days later. Emerson is buried in Sleepy Hollow Cemetery, Concord, Massachusetts. He was placed in his coffin wearing a white robe given by the American sculptor Daniel Chester French. Ralph Waldo Emerson wrote the following: "Every excess causes a defect, every defect an excess. Every sweet hath its sour, every evil its good. For everything you have missed, you have gained something else, and for everything you gain you lose something."